All right, calling the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Has there been a declaration of public notice?
There has.
Under business, there's no public appearances today. Can I please have a motion for the consent agenda?
Move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, I guess we'll do roll call vote. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
All right, ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, next. Our recognitions.
Okay, I'd like to start recognitions by making note of a couple of the items that were just in the consent agenda that were approved. First of all was a gift, a very generous gift from Trek Bicycle for water bottles for staff and students at an $8,900 value. So they've been distributed in every school building, or there's plans to have them distributed, and so certainly very much appreciated. Also, I'd like to recognize that we had some recent staff retirements that were approved, and I actually missed, two were approved at the last meeting and then one this evening, so I'd like to recognize all three individuals tonight. So retiring at the end of the school year will be Janice Stone, a band teacher at Glacial Drumlin School. Pat Onsacker, a special education teacher at the high school, and Brian Storms, a Phi Ed teacher at the high school. And then to our other recognitions, the GDS Science Olympiad team recently competed at the regional competition and took home medals in 6 events while facing 15 schools and 24 total teams. Congratulations to the team for all their hard work, and we wish them good luck as they move on to state. Through our Farm to School program partnership, we've featured local foods in our school lunches each Thursday. Last week, students who ordered school lunch got to try chili with a few local ingredients. This week is also National School Breakfast Week. We know how important it is for our students to eat a healthy meal at the start of the day so they can focus on learning throughout the day. Thanks to our school nutrition team for all the work they do to serve meals for our students. We are also proud of the dedication and hard work that our athletic teams have been putting in this winter season. The boys basketball team completed their season with a record of 17-9. Congratulations to the seniors on the team: Eddie Rivera, Max Weezy, Johnny Bittner, Josh Criari, Brady Voss, DeAndre Lemon, and Cole Inda. The girls basketball team finished off their season with a record of 21-5. Congratulations to seniors Taylor Moreau and Delaney Brackett. And the high school Model UN team made history by winning the biggest award in Monona Grove Model UN history as outstanding delegation at the Chicago International Model UN Conference. Great job to all students who participated, and we wish them the best of luck as they complete their season at their final competition next week.
Well, and Dan, at least two, and there may have been more. It just depends upon where you were deeply involved in the schools. But two of the students that won awards are kids of their parents are MG grads. Or one is MG grads and one is an MG teacher that helped raise our children, for sure.
Thanks for sharing, Susan. All right, no correspondence and announcements.
Oh, and Dan, what about the kids on TV? The breakfast out at, where's Katie? The breakfast out at Cottage Grove School? Yeah, and Jill Underley was there, right? She was. And they were on TV, the 5 o'clock news that day?
Yeah, so as part of the celebration for the school breakfast week, our local legislators held a press conference at Cottage Grove School. And so along with that, we had a second grade representative student able to participate in that morning, so, yeah.
It was great to watch him get interviewed by Ms. Underley. Yeah, it was really adorable to watch. And they also served a parfait at the end. It was really good. So
I really appreciate how much our I feel like this year in particular, we're paying a lot of attention to our school nutrition program with, farm to school, and I think the pictures that, people are taking that Katie, you're doing a great job posting, and so I really like that. I think it's really cool.
Well, and the whole healthcare issue is so important right now with kids. It's just a critical issue. And the TV coverage was very good.
Yeah, I will just add, thank you for bringing that up. In addition to our local legislators who, all spoke, and State Superintendent Jill Underly, our school's nutrition director, Maggie Santa, also spoke and did a fabulous job.
She did.
She's great.
Yeah.
Well, again, you're never really sure how, do you want a bunch of board members making the crowd too big, and we didn't have a time. But it was wonderful to see it on TV. I loved watching it on TV. That was great.
As a student, I will say I'm very glad that the younger kids are getting into nutrition at such a young age, because when I was about their age, that was a time Michelle Obama was really pushing through the nutrition campaign. And I feel like we've really lost that sense, especially at the high school. So that's why I'm so glad to see that we're continuing to put not just healthy ingredients, but also especially local ingredients back onto our school lunch trays.
Great point, Krishna. I agree with you.
You can play that. That'd be nice.
Trick is to turn it off.
All right, there are no correspondence and announcements, and next are administrative reports, superintendent report, Dan.
Okay, so for my report, we have an outline of the referendum communications. I believe it was requested in the last meeting to add to the agenda. So Katie put together this, I think, very clear outline of all the events that we, and the type of communications that we've been doing and will continue to do leading up to the election on April 4th. And so I think the document's pretty self-explanatory, so I think we just open it up to any questions that board members have.
Elizabeth?
No question, just a comment for you, Dan, and your team, and especially for you, Katie. I really appreciate the correspondences. I love the frequency of them. I love that, the focal point, shifts slightly, right? And it feels adaptable to what you're hearing in the community or kind of where we want to emphasize things. And so, no questions. I'm really grateful for all your work and very impressed.
And we were actually, Susan, and Eric was there too, last night at the listening session at Winnequa School, and it was extremely well done. I mean, there's a whole variety of knowledge bases in that room, and it wasn't a big crowd, but it was a nice crowd. And they asked really good questions, and there were several people that clearly it tended to exemplify some pretty good concerns about the referendum, and Dan answered the questions extremely well. And I actually walked out with some of them, and they go, that was a really good meeting, I learned a lot. So it's not just coming from us, it's coming from the community. So I think the in-person listening sessions, understanding the virtual, I watched that day, you guys sat there for an hour waiting for people to kind of come in. But you've been very patient, very thoughtful about providing the information in a variety of places, accessible to the community, and the presentation is very good.
Great feedback. Eric and then Susan.
I did mention this to Katie, so I'm sure it's going to be adjusted, but the only thing about the in-person meetings is I thought it would be nice to have them on the event calendar. The district event calendar, just another thing.
Sure.
People can check and see it, and they weren't up there, so. Okay. I know we're getting emails and stuff, but sometimes people look at the event calendar too, so.
Thank you, Eric. Susan?
Yeah, I would agree with that also. I think it's just helpful to have it so that it's easily accessible, easily findable. And I guess the only main takeaway for me last night was to again stress that the purpose of this is to maintain what we're doing now and right up front. And I think you've been doing that pretty much, but not everybody, non-parents and other community members don't necessarily see all the individual newsletters. They just have this one piece. And even though it's in here, I think stating it up front real clearly is maybe a good idea. But otherwise, yeah, I thought it was good also. And I think our big concern about this was explaining it because it's so complicated, and I really do think that you do a good job in here, so. People have to exert a little effort on their own to think about it, but it's all there.
Thank you, Susan.
And then I just want to clarify, we have two, is this right, two more virtual coffee and conversations still coming up. And that's effectively the 15th and the 21st? Do we have any, is that?
The week after that is spring break, so there's spring break.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Okay, no other questions?
Oh, and then the MESBA board meeting?
Okay, moving on to business services report. Mark?
Yeah, provide you with the audit, the 21-22 audit for both the district and MG21, which needs to be done separately with state statute or their agreement. And then the letter from the auditor to explain, what they see, and it's a lot of it's boilerplate. They have to comply with GASB. But the audit is unmodified, which is what we strive for, and we are compliant with all state and federal requirements. There was one finding that we need to address that has been ongoing for a couple of years, but I think with the additional staff that we have this year, that will hopefully disappear next year. So I'm pleased with the audit, even though I wasn't really here. I'm pleased with how we ended up. And so, we did have a reduction in the operating fund balance of about $900,000. And so right now, our fund balance, Peter, is 18.5%.
Thank you. Was I gonna have, we decreased about $1 million, correct?
Yeah.
970,000 or less.
901.
901, sorry.
So, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to address them, but I'm sure, you probably spent days going over the details.
And Susan Manning said it's 92 pages, right?
Oh, that was just the audit report.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
the audit report.
And I'm skimming through that.
Summary.
I'm trying to skim through it,
Yeah, well, a lot of it's boilerplate.
I said,
because they have to meet
Mark will
certain-
cover that.
Yeah, it's-
But the one thing I thought maybe you, in case clarity about what the issue, the one issue that they spoke to in the audit was, you might just want to mention that because it very clearly was due to change in staff. And in the report, it basically just stated the reconciliation.
Yeah, the monthly reconciliation of the books.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just basically a function of the transition, and we addressed that with the hire of Laura Curry and some other people, and definition or defining duties more clearly, and so that should address it as we go
Well,
forward.
And the commendable thing is, even though they identified it in the audit, you had already identified it and taken care of it. So
Well,
that's really nice.
That was a little prior before me. I can't take all the credit in the world, but the additional staff in April that we hired was a big step in doing that. And then as we worked through the summer, we identified what we needed to do to go forward, and we're working on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Peter?
Thank you. One of the things is that, we think about our capital budgets and our operating budgets separately. And of course, this financial report is required to stuff them all together.
Sure.
It makes it a little difficult to sort through and find the things that I look for and so on. Just to reference, it does make it difficult to look at this. OPEB liabilities are decreased, but not as much as we still have about $7 million in OPEB liabilities. When do we start seeing that significantly decrease? It only went down by about $200,000 this year.
Well, part of it is what we pay, the length that we pay, and if people that are grandfathered in at a certain level start retiring, then it may go up. You never know. But I would have to look at the age and payouts of the people that are on the list, whatever, and see how many come off on a yearly basis to figure that out.
Some point, we expect to see some significant
Exactly,
savings.
because that's what
changes that we have made.
Right, yeah,
We still
it's
have
just a
some
long
ways to go.
process, because depending on how many people fit in each category, we did have one, I don't know if it was last year or this year, past year, one special pay kind of retirement go away. So that probably contributed to the reduction as well. But yeah, we just have to we'd have to do an audit.
And it's always good to see the auditor statement, other than just the time required for the reconciliation, that there's no other concerns.
Yep.
Susan?
Yeah, I thought, and I think it was a couple of years ago that Jared had said that Tier 1 retirement would take another 12 years to be totally free of, so, you know, as you just said, when you have people, that's still going on for another 10 or so, for sure.
Yeah.
And then when you have other people leaving, you know, it will go up and down a little bit, so it's a while yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of different variations of that.
And I'll chime in, I mean, Mark and I have looked at this together, the Tier 2 retirement plan is really the one that's the variable right now. It depends on how many people retire each year,
Right.
and that's a pay-as-you-go type thing. So as you mentioned, it could actually go up a little bit because
With
then
Tier
it
2.
goes down. And
Sure.
If they all went at one time, I think you said, Dan, there was about 25 of them in that
There's
tier.
about 25 eligible right now
Right.
that are, will turn 55, so,
They'll stay a while.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it'll be a while.
All right, no other questions? Moving on to board reports. Teaching, Learning, and Equity Committee, Elizabeth.
Yes, so the Teaching and Learning Equity Committee met on February 27th. We had one item on the agenda, and that was to revisit our elementary infrastructure, specifically related to our 4K2 building and our first and second grade building in Cottage Grove. For those of you who've been on the board for a while, you'll remember that when that decision was made, there was discussion around revisiting that after a couple of years of implementation, and believe it or not, that's where we are at. And so Emily was there, Lisa, Angie, Dan, and Danielle, as well as Katie, as well, and a practicum student that's working with Krista, who is also there, to sort of talk about, what are the advantages and some of the challenges to the way that our buildings are set up, given student transitions, and then given the fact that some of our students are age clustered, and there's some benefits to that. And so we had a really lovely conversation, and the sort of consensus from our group is that we want to continue to study it and see whether or not this is the best approach. And so we'll continue to talk about it in TLE, and then go forth from there.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Susan?
So having listened to this, I mean, it was really a great committee meeting to listen to, and I'm sure, like Susan and Peter will remember, I mean, the research is very clear that a transition does affect student learning. Sometimes just a little, sometimes a lot, sometimes virtually unidentifiably. But, it's one thing to be in a school for 5 years, and by that time, you at least know who the teachers are and where the rooms are and kind of where your bathrooms are. And the staff was just great about this. They clearly understand that. They have worked to identify what the issues might be and how to work on them, and how to make the students feel like it's a more positive experience rather than being affected by the transition. And the way you set it up, Elizabeth, was really well done. And to have, again, the staff that spoke, didn't think, because it is a concern based on the research as a board member you've got to have. And to know that they already know that, they've known it for quite a while, and they've been working on it constantly, does help to alleviate that concern.
Thank you for the feedback.
It's really good.
All right, moving on to possible action items. First is 2022-2023 school calendar revision and start and end times for Monona Grove High School and Glacial Drumlin School.
Okay, so I'll start with the summary, and then this document, it really was both, of course, Mitch McGrath as high school principal, Chris Langer, middle school principal, and Lisa Hype, and I all really worked on this together to come forth with this recommendation on making up the instructional minutes lost due to school closures. So you might recall earlier this year, you already approved an adjustment to the high school schedule for them to do e-learning days on what were already scheduled as professional development days. And now, unfortunately, we've had a couple more closures, so we need some more minutes to make up. As we approach this, we really wanted to avoid the idea of adding additional days at the end of the school year in June. I mean, people, families, students have plans already. We have final exams at the high school that would be very disruptive to have to move that in, to the next week and so on. So we're trying to be as creative as possible to find how we can make up those instructional minutes. So at the end of the day, we really have two options. One is additional virtual learning days, and the other is to add minutes onto the actual school day to get to where we need to be. And so what you see in this proposal is a combination of each for both schools. So the high school had more minutes to make up than GDS. So GDS are looking at one virtual learning day plus an additional 2 minutes, which is very manageable, does not impact transportation at all. High school a little bit more complex, needing to add 7 minutes to the school day. That does impact transportation. The buses that arrive at the high school in the morning, some of them first run routes for our Cottage Grove elementary schools, then they pick up high school students and come to Monona. So we had to be real careful, and based on the arrival time that we have, we felt we could start the day 5 minutes earlier and then extend the day for the last 2 minutes at the end of the day. The rationale for wanting to put as many at the beginning of the day as possible, as you know, in the spring, we have a lot of high school activities that students need to get to that they already many times have to be dismissed earlier, and so it was really preferable to try to put as many minutes at the start of the day as possible. So that's kind of the big picture, but Mr. McGrath is here, Lisa, both can answer any specific questions you have about the implementation part. They're the ones that really put this together. So,
Susan?
Even though this it's not my favorite thing in terms of meaningful minutes, it makes sense to me to do it this way, and I appreciate the virtual minutes you've added. My other question was whether you had a sense of how that first virtual day went, since we've had one. I mean, how many kids participated and how?
So only anecdotally do I have feedback on that day. That one was a little bit odd in that we had a snow day on Thursday.
Right, okay, right before.
School on Friday
Yeah.
was a planned non-contract day, and then Monday was our async day, so
Yeah.
the way that, we have a snow day actually that Wednesday.
We had two.
Wednesday and Thursday.
Oh, trust me, Mitch, we had many days in a row.
Yeah, we had 2 snow days, then the non-contract day, then the async day, but that Friday, we did have students coming in and picking up their Chromebooks so that they would have them for
Okay.
the async day on Monday.
Well, that's a good
Along
sign.
with teachers, it's a little bit of a mix, but I would say fairly successful overall.
Okay, and it might take a couple of
We'll
days.
do like more of a official survey with staff after the next 2
Yeah.
that are a little more well set up. The idea is that, if it's on a Monday, teachers can tee that lesson up, that information up on Thursday and Friday.
Right.
Then everyone knows what the expectation is for Monday. Some teachers did that on Monday and Tuesday of that week, kind of anticipating there might be a snow day or 2.
Okay, good, thanks.
Susan?
Well, it's interesting, when you're watching the TV and it's talking about closings, and poor Dan is going, you have to wait till 3 or whatever it is in the week. But it'll say Cuba City virtual. And you just see that every time and you think, and then the next time you'll see 2 schools trying it. So, I mean, I really appreciate that you're trying it. It may not be successful or work, but I appreciate that you're trying to do it. I mean,
Krishna?
I will say that as it refers to virtual days, of course I'm unfamiliar with the levels of success the rest of the staff have seen. But at least from my personal experience as well as the experience of my friends, I know that we were all able to get the gist of it pretty easily because it harks back to the days of COVID. And where we did pretty much virtual learning days for about a year. So the good news is that when it comes to these snow days and needing to adjust the schedule to fit our priorities, a lot of us already have the backgrounds in these sort of changes in schedule to be able to adapt and evolve to new situations pretty quickly. One thing that I definitely think we've been blessed with. So that, along with just the general efforts made to bring us up to speed schedule-wise, I truly appreciate all the board has done to make this as smooth and consistent as possible.
That's great feedback.
Can I ask Krishna just a question
Sure.
kind of on that?
Yeah.
So, just with your thoughts in the high school, if we surveyed, do you think the students would prefer the virtual day versus 3 virtual days versus 3 extra days in?
That's not really a fair question to ask, Susan.
Why not?
Because you're asking Krishna to assume what people, when
To speak to
do a survey.
opinion, and I said, and we could survey the high school. I'm sorry, I missed that, Eric.
It's not a good question.
Krishna is a student representative. Yes.
True, don't worry,
The
no.
sport.
I will say that while of course I can't speak for everyone in my school, yeah, it definitely comes down to character and work ethic. But just going off of personal experience here, I know that it's very hard to grind out 3 extra days to the end of the school year when you're already anticipating break, rather when you're already in the flow of the school year and you just have virtual days. So I would say I slightly prefer the virtual days, but of course that's going to differ person to person.
Thank you, Krishna. Eric?
Good job, Krishna. My concern is I've heard from numerous constituents, primarily more in middle school than high school, that they would prefer minutes over virtual days because they don't feel that the virtual days are as beneficial. They feel like that, and I'm not criticizing teachers, I know virtual days are, but the feeling is that there are assignments that are just handed out and a lot less teaching. So with the asynchronous primarily, I guess they're probably talking about. But nonetheless, my question is it possible, is there a PD day that would be available to use as an instructional day? I didn't look at the calendar,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Yeah, so for the middle school specifically, they are making up minutes for that virtual day will be on a PD day.
The March 24th.
I think what you're asking is, could you flip that to an
Correct.
instructional?
I'm asking if it could be an in-person day and not a virtual.
We're recommending not doing that because we already have professional development planned, for all of our staff.
So
All
how-
the other buildings will be doing.
How is staff supposed to do professional development and a virtual asynchronous day at the same
So
time?
the asynchronous day is they are preparing lessons in advance, they post them, but then there's not interaction throughout the day.
Asynchronous.
I know Dan wanted to
Oh, yeah,
say
Dan wanted to
something.
say something.
Did you?
So- Yeah, well, and I just wanted to point out, with regard to the minutes, as far as the option of adding all the minutes to extend the school day, that would make it well over an additional 10 minutes per school day would have to be added to make up all of those. Then you do get into busing issues.
Right, and that's why I was asking about taking, what I was thinking, Dan, and I do know a little bit about education and teaching, considering I've done it most of my life, but what I was thinking is taking one of the PD days, eliminating the professional
Right.
development, and making it an instructional day.
Yeah. That would be an option. And we would just lose out on the PD for that day.
I realize that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's all saying. So.
Okay, a lot of hands going. I know Krishna too. I don't know, do you, Mark?
No, Krishna, you.
Yeah, just something to respond to that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
I
course.
just had a point of clarification. As a student, as well as anyone else watching, what is a professional development day?
Great question. So, for example, the last one that we had in the morning, it was a district-wide professional development. We had all teachers on curriculum teams. Okay, so if you were a middle or high school math teacher, all those teachers, 612 are together, so all the departments, 612 met, and then at the elementary, every teacher was with a subject area. And so we had, for a couple hours that morning, everyone doing the same processes. One of our strategic plan goals is to amplify student voice in the educational process. And so this was our second PD day where we talked about that, what that means for teachers and how they deliver instruction and how they do that with students. So that's an example of the type of professional development that happens. And then there also was discussion about curriculum standards and so on as well. So that was the morning, and then in the afternoon, teachers returned to their buildings and they had planning at the school level that was developed by the principals.
Thank you.
Okay, Elizabeth and then Peter.
Question, Dan. Just because I'm looking at like the minutes breakdown here. Let's say that we could flip a day and make an instructional day instead of a PD day. Would that solve 4 minutes issues, or would we still have to add time to the calendar?
For the middle school, right, we need the one full day plus those 2 minutes, on the.
So it's one full day plus those 2 minutes.
Right.
Regardless. So those 2 minutes are coming on regardless of
Right.
what we do with that day.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm with Eric in terms of thinking maybe a little bit more creatively around how we can, I just feel like a little flexible. I mean, there's a lot of snow days in a very short amount of time, very wild weather this year, and is this an opportunity for us to say, PD is very important, and face-to-face instructional minutes are important, and we're sort of faced with maybe a potential choice, and we choose the instructional minutes instead. And I feel like it reminds me of like in the early days of COVID. Do you remember this, Eric, when we were having this conversation around like the transition time as we were preparing for return to school, and it was like, well, what can come off the plate? And it was like, well, nothing can come off the plate in terms of PD. And I'm like, I don't know that I necessarily buy that, right? Like, what would be the harm in not having a PD day versus potential harm of loss of instruction, face-to-face instructional minutes that day? And I think that that's something that's worth at least weighing or thinking about.
Yeah, and we absolutely had that conversation. And some of the other factors are, if you have the middle school is the only school in the district that is open that day, okay, we're running specialized bus routes now just for the middle school students. Families that have students that are at middle school but are not in other grades,
Elementary's not open that day?
No, it's PD day for the district.
They have that, the elementary has that day off.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't need the instructional minutes
Right, so
except
the-
for the middle school. So
Right,
that's
Right.
basically-
So-
So you'd miss, those teachers would be the only ones that would miss.
Exactly. And I think
Yeah.
the anticipation is we'd have pretty low attendance on that day.
Well, it would be it could be the high school or the middle school. So you're really just looking
It could be.
at that elementary, because it could be beneficial to the high school as well
Sure.
for that instructional day. So then you're looking at a PD day just for elementary, which is a little bit more realistic if you have the high school and middle school doing, because that's not unheard of
Yeah.
to do that.
Eric, you kind of jumped to Peter.
Sorry.
That's all right. It was an ongoing conversation. I'm going to take a little different view. I mean, we have to prepare students to work in a world now that will be partially virtual. When they graduate in college and in the work world, everybody's moving to some degree virtually of virtual work, and our students need to be prepared for that. So not only do I support the virtual learning time days, but I think we really need to look at this as an opportunity to make sure our students are prepared to be successful once they graduate. Now, for the current cohort, it's not such a big deal. They've had this beaten into them. But for future cohorts, as things go forward, we need to think about how we use this time, and I think we really need to design it into the system. And we need to be thinking about not, it's just a little extra assignment or something like that. We need to think about making sure that our students are prepared to work virtually and everything that means because that's the world that they're going to face. If they go to college, if they go into a workplace, that's the world they're going to face, and they need to be prepared for it. So I think this virtual time is important, and we should make sure that it's an ongoing thing that we do in the district. And then my second question is, how the heck do we use 7 extra minutes a day in the high school?
We are adding two to each period periods 1, 3, and 4. That's 6 of them, and then the 7th minute is added to second period. Second period is already longer for announcements, so we don't want to add 2 there.
Okay.
So, you know, I mean, that's the one thing you weigh out when you think about, like, is our extra minutes each day more valuable than an async day? And, you know, at the high school level, where students are a little more independent, they're learning, you know, they can accomplish quite a bit on an async day versus that extra minute every second hour for the rest of the year.
And then if I could make one more comment, which is relative to Krishna, which is it's great to have Krishna on this with us. He's in a unique situation. Then when we think about asking Krishna questions, there's an extra complication that we need to think about when we're talking amongst ourselves. And I want to also say to Krishna, I hope to not ever ask you anything that you're not comfortable answering. But if you are, please, you don't have to answer anything, any question or participate in discussion if you think that that's a challenge for you in any way. After saying that, what do you think of Principal? But you see my point, and I just want you're not obligated to answer anything that I might ask, and I'm going to try and think about that when I'm thinking about questions for you.
Thanks, I appreciate that, but was always willing to push in.
Thanks.
Thank you. Lisa actually had wanted to say something really quick, I think.
I know it's a bullet point on that document that's attached, but the continuity of learning, I don't want to gloss over that. It's not just a lesson that someone might be pulling out of a file or, something that's disconnected to the flow of learning. They are lessons that stay within the continuous stream of what is happening in class. So teachers do need a little time to prep and prepare, but the lesson itself that kids are being asked to do does fall in line with exactly what they've been learning, so students can return from the virtual learning day and be prepared for, again, to continue the ongoing learning face-to-face. So, again, I just wanted to say that it is a thoughtfully prepared task or multiple tasks that students are being asked to do.
I do not mean to imply that it wasn't. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that on an ongoing basis we do think about this in a meaningful way.
Susan Manning, and I do see your hand.
I just, again, I think it's helpful for us to have a discussion about the role of the student member on this board. We did that before we put them on. And again, as part of the orientation of board members, if you ever want to sit down and talk about policy, we can do that for a while. But again, the philosophy of the board, 1, 2, 3, it's our board policy. Again, we're a legal entity. This is a non-voting member. It's just like when you're a non-voting member on a committee. You are allowed to participate in whatever way you want to. So it's not my job as another board member to say, oh, I'm pretty sure you're not comfortable about answering the question I just asked you. That's up to you. There's going to be a point where that happens to me too. But you're a member like every other member, and basically it's two-way conversations, or 7-way conversations. And basically the policy talks about 2-way. But we have responsibility to exercise best judgment of determining policies, making decisions, and approving procedures for carrying out our responsibilities. And he's a part of that.
Thank you, Susan. Susan?
Thank you, Lisa, for that comment, because that was part of what I was thinking. When we had this discussion initially, we talked about the reason we weren't going to do it, apparently some districts are, which is as soon as there's a snow day, bam, that's a virtual day. We didn't want to do that because then teachers have not had time to plan a meaningful virtual lesson.
Right.
Because ours are scheduled ahead, they can do that and they can provide some continuity of learning. I would expect the first couple days might be a little bumpier, kids getting back into it and the whole thing. But I also think, I mean, because I made this comment the last time, the reason I preferred it was because when you add a couple of minutes here and there on the day, how much meaningful difference does that make in the learning? You know, now, it's not the same as having a whole day of a lesson, but I just think we're left without good options in that way. I also don't want to minimize the importance of professional development for our staff. We have goals that are set as a district, that are set in every building, and part of those professional development days, the work that goes on there is toward achieving those goals and, you know, moving the needle on some of the issues that we're dealing with. So I think that it's important because, you know, sometimes you're a parent, well, why do they have all these professional development days? And they're very important, and they're part of the whole job of the school. And I think once you take one of those away, because I just remember some back when we were trying to write curriculum and we didn't have anywhere near enough time to do it, and the result was it didn't happen. And I think, you know, it's important to make a commitment to those days and keep them, and they do factor into the success of the whole school. So I think, you know, this may be just something that people have to get used to, and I just think this is, it's always hard to make up these missed days, but I think this is a good solution, and I hope we don't have any more snow days this year. But
Friday.
Well, yeah, let's not jump the gun. But I think, you know, just remembering how it is at the end of the year, yeah, you can add days at the end of the year, and they're pretty worthless, really. I mean, they just are. And adding a few minutes here and there, that's not, you know, doesn't do a lot either, but it jumps through the proper hoop, and it's legal. So I think this is the best solution, personally.
Thank you, Susan. Krishna, and then Philip.
Thank you. I would say that, harkening back to Eric's comments, I would personally believe that any amount of time that we can get in person would be practically a godsend at this point. That's not to go against the comments made in the defense of professional development days. Of course, I'm not a staff member, but I understand that running a school and organizing curriculum must be an incredibly challenging task. But I think at the end of the day, what we were being pushed towards with these snow days, and to knock on synthetic wood here, perhaps another one, is that we are going to fall into a place where we lack consistency. Of course, this isn't going to be a major factor for the rest of the school year, but it definitely will continue to nudge at our ability as students to predictably plan on what's ahead and to absorb curriculum as we go along, as well as prepare for tests, etc., and go for activities, etc., etc. My point is that, of course, if we could convert even just one professional development day into a in-person learning day, I'd be very interested to see how we can negotiate that to make sure all parties can benefit. But in relationship to Peter's comments about the importance of learning a virtual dynamic, I'd also agree that if that result cannot be achieved, then not only do many of us students, especially at the high school, but I would also believe in the middle school as well, have the mental infrastructure to maximize the utility of a virtual day if our character is up to it. But I also believe that, just as Peter said, that is an important future skill to adapt. As much as I'm discussing the inconsistency of school schedule so far, I would also agree that it's an important skill to learn to be, it's important to adapt. So all of this wraps into one central point, in that I believe that it should be the utmost policy of the board, or at least it will be, of my opinion, that we need to prioritize consistency for our students. Of course, that's not always going to be easy in practice, and that is a reason why I'm very glad to have my voice, to bring the voice of all the other students into the board. But I would say that, above all, that is what I value, and I'm sure you will see the effects of that compound when invested into our students.
Thank you, Krishna. Philip?
Yeah, I just wanted to drop a comment as it relates to ad hoc virtual days. One thing I was thinking about as I've been listening to the conversation is how over the past few years, you know, for my family, I'm assuming for others as well, the pressure on the home to support multiple virtual workers has increased, right? So, you know, a few years ago, I was working from home intermittently. My wife was not working from home at all. Now we're both working from home, you know, me full-time, her nearly full-time, and sometimes we trip over each other, you know, looking for space and quiet place and private place. So as we introduce potentially ad hoc virtual days, I think we should just keep in mind that we give families enough warning and heads up so that they can potentially make the right arrangements to provide the right kind of adequate space for the students. So it's compatible with potentially two parents working from home or whatever it is. It can put a lot of pressure on people's households.
Thank you, Philip. I have a question. Yeah, my question is, Dan, neighboring districts, do you know what they're doing in regards to snow days?
I think there's several things, and so I think it's a combination of what's happening here. The one district I'm aware of close by that made the decision early on that we're always going to do virtual days on the day of the snow day was Portage. They made that decision prior to the start of the school year that that's how they were going to accommodate them. Everyone else that in the Dane County area is looking at alternatives like we are to make up, their hours. A combination of minutes and, asynchronous days. So I'm not aware of anyone else at this point that is in a situation where they'll be doing the virtual on the same day as the snow day. I think everyone is trying to avoid that as much as possible.
Thank you. Susan and then Elizabeth.
Actually, I was just gonna make a motion, and then we can continue to
Oh,
talk
yeah,
about
you
it.
make a motion, I'll.
I move approval of
Discussion.
the revised 2022-2023 school calendars and start and end times from Monona Grove High School and Glacial Berlin School as presented. Second.
Any further discussion? Elizabeth?
So here's my question. Is there a way, or have we, and if not, is there a way to pull in the voices of the folks that are going to be the most impacted, right, which are our staff and our students, around what their preferences are?
Yeah, maybe I'll turn to you, Mitch. You've had those conversations with the high school staff since you were the first that had to go through this.
Yeah. So our first conversations, we did identify that we may need days, and so just a contingency plan and talk about, would that be the snow day or would that be the PD day or how would we do it? And definitely wanted to have some predictability, so that's why we identified 3 PD days in priority of the best day versus the least desirable day. Teachers can definitely plan for that day in advance, and it's not the night of that we're thinking, what is that lesson going to look like tomorrow if it's a snow day. Now with the snow day, we will be in that situation. We have had some practice. Like Krishna said, it's not new to anyone, creating a lesson and posting it online and students accessing it. In terms of the async day on the snow day or adding additional minutes or additional day, given those choices, definitely the async day on the snow day is the preference.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Did you ever entertain the idea of turning a PD day into an instructional day?
That never came up in our conversations really as an option or an item for discussion.
I'd just be curious about folks' perspective on that, and not to discount professional development. I love professional development. I think it's incredibly important.
I think it's fun.
It's fun. My day job is building professional development for educators, so you will not ever hear me say anything disparaging about professional development. I do think we're in an interesting moment here, right? It's just an anomalous, although maybe with climate change it won't be anomalous, but theoretically anomalous moment where we've just had an abundance of snow days in a short amount of time. And I think about the burden on students, the burden on families, the burdens on staff around the combination of factors. And I wonder if it's worth just positing the question, what are your thoughts and feelings around moving to an in-person instructional day instead of a PD day with async? That's all.
I guess from my lens as a former educator, you have your lesson plans already in place, and then you're adding this day, it's a burden on the teacher. It's kind of my viewpoint, I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. I'm curious to,
Yeah. And just kind of having to throw a day together that may not be as meaningful because they didn't have that all planned beforehand. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
my
fair.
thought. Peter?
My understanding of the research is that we don't do enough professional development, that we would be better trading class time, class time for professional development time, because you have a balance. More professional development time you have, the better what goes on in the classroom is. And there's a quantity versus quality, and you have to find the right balance of that. And if you look at the result, the research, it seems to show that we haven't pushed that far enough, that we should be doing more professional development. And even if it means trading off, we would have better outcomes if we traded professional development, classroom time for professional development.
I mean, there's some nuance there, but the quality of our professional development is high, so it's not worth getting into the nuances there.
Right, well, yeah, I mean, you obviously have to do everything right, but in systems where they do have a higher emphasis on professional development and less class time, they get better outcomes. They tend to get, statistically, you tend to get better outcomes. And it seems to be that we're right now not doing enough
There's
professional
nuances there,
development.
Peter.
There is, but right now, if you would look at this, and we won't get into the nuances, but I hate giving up professional development because from a high level, you would say that we in the U.S. system, we do not do enough professional development, and we would benefit by doing more professional development, even if it meant less face-to-face time in the classroom.
Thank you, Peter. Eric? Wow, okay. First, responding to you, Peter, I believe the research you're referring to does not account for snow days. So when they're talking about professional development, they're talking, I know, well, that's what we're talking about here. They're talking about adding professional development and making sure staff is compensated for that into the school year. Right. We're talking about a situation we're in where we have to make a decision, probably not a good one either way, based on a snow day and how we're going to make up instructional minutes according to our requirements by the state. So looking at that situation, I look at instructional days as a priority over professional development. And most importantly, I've heard directly from no less than 10 people in my community that it is, like as Philip alluded to, it's a significant burden on them, some of these virtual days. For the families, for the people that are two families that are working at home have mentioned this to me, that they have to stop working to make sure the students are able to do these virtual days in their house. So it takes away time from them too. So the feedback I've heard, and it's just, I mean, let's fair enough, but my neighborhood is that, the preference of the community, not talking about the teachers, not talking about the staff, of the community, the parents, would be to use a professional development day if it's possible. And if it was possible for the high school and the middle school to do that, I think it would be beneficial. I'm not going to vote yes for this as it sits right now. I'm sorry, I don't know who's first. Susan Fox and then
Oh, I just
Susan
have a brief comment. Well, there aren't enough professional development days left in the year to make all these up.
Well, but everyone
So
helps.
if you did at the beginning of the year, you'd be wiping out all of them for this year, because there just aren't that many. So I just think that's another factor you have to consider, and I guess it also goes back to people not necessarily understanding how important the professional development days are. I mean, I don't necessarily think we'll ever be able to fit in more of them, as per Peter's comments. I think, the student contact days are very important. I'm not diminishing that, certainly. But I just think, there's no really great answer to this. To me, this seems like the best solution, given the choices we have, so.
Thank you, Susan.
Well, and I think the other thing is, I think we've had a great discussion about this, and I think we've had good input from board members about this. Some of us have researched this, as Peter did, and I have, and have experience, as the other board members do. I think the fact is, though, again, when you look at our policy, the balance issues that we're talking about, balancing between a professional day. Let's say there have been 50 school shootings in Wisconsin in the last year, and so your professional development was going to be about a safety plan. And you have to decide, ultimately, I think this comes to our superintendent to look at the options that are in front of him, weigh exactly the things we've been talking about for the last hour, and bring us a recommendation. and I think at this point, he's worked hard to do that. It's one in this particular situation, and we may decide, Dan knows that, we may decide differently if we had one less snow day or 2 more snow days, which we could still have. But in this particular case, we're relying on him to have talked to the principals and the other administrators that are involved in this issue, weighed against the things he's going to have to balance, and he's brought us a recommendation that looks workable and works within the transportation, which is the nightmare of your life. So I would continue to support this.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Elizabeth?
I hear you. I guess what I'm hearing is that, like, there are other options on the table that we didn't necessarily walk down, right? So to me, like, if you came down and you're like, okay, so we thought about flipping a PD day to an instructional day, here are the benefits and liabilities to that. We did this, here are the benefits, we did all these things, and here's our best recommendation. That's, to me, a different story than, like, to me, it doesn't even feel like that was something that was even on the table. And so unless I'm misunderstanding, and if I am, please, like, tell me, yes, we talked about it, and here's where we came to. But it doesn't sound like we even entertained that possibility.
Yeah. No, that's a fair question. So I think everything has been a lot of really good points made, right? So we've covered all the different things that can be considered. Here's the way I look at it. So when it came time to determine how we're going to make up these minutes, okay, left that completely to Mitch and his team. Lisa's the person who counts the minutes and makes sure that we're there. I looked at it from the lens of what is the least disruptive to the current schedule. We published that calendar, parents count on it, they plan vacations around it, so I wanted to have something that did not adjust those calendar dates. And I would say, just from my own experience as a classroom teacher, teachers adapt all the time, okay? And so they know what they need to get through, all curriculum's important, but some is more essential than others. We have a teacher who has an illness, is out for 5 days. At the high school, there's a good chance that sub is not a certified teacher in that subject area. That teacher comes back, they adjust, they get the kids where they need to be. And so that's why I'm not really concerned about losing an instructional day. The teachers will figure that out, and the kids will get the instruction they need. To be honest, this is jumping through hoops for some archaic law about minutes that is not research-based.
Yep.
We're just doing what we can, so we're complying with the law.
See? Thank you, Dan.
Exactly my point about the minutes. I mean, that's exactly why we're doing that, is jump through.
Well, I know that's why
okay.
we're doing it, but I
Yeah.
just, let's like,
Right.
let's like walk it through, right? Like,
Yeah.
I just gotta see the thinking and the logic, and
Yeah.
I'm good
But-
now.
But at the end of the day, you're right, we didn't have a serious discussion about that. I think in all the conversations we've had over the years, all we talk about is we would like to have more PD days. They are so valuable, the teachers see them.
Yeah.
And the other thing we didn't talk about, it's not all just training, it's an opportunity for collaboration time
Right.
among colleagues that is really important as well. So that's why I think, it was just kind of not really a consideration. But this is an excellent conversation, and I know that we will talk about that in the future.
Sold. I'm good. Thank you, Dan.
All right, so we have a motion out, or do you have some?
My comments are only just because I hate seeing professional development being rated, sort of as the lowest priority when we talk about things, because it shouldn't be. And I understand, obviously, that this is about the schedule.
Yeah,
but
it's kind
just
of a false
matter of-
dichotomy,
It's just a
a
matter
little
of, going forward, where do we rank things as important when we look at things? And in professional development, it should not be underestimated.
I got one comment.
Yeah.
Just because people keep bringing up professional development, just keep bringing it up. I'd love to see what the teachers think about professional development days. I don't know, but I'd be real curious to see if it's within line of what administration thinks. Just leave it at
I'm
that.
gonna wear I Heart PD days
Yeah.
at our next board meeting. It's a little frustrating because it's a false
I'm gonna have to stop
dichotomy.
you because Krishna had his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Krishna.
Oh, of course, it's fine. I just want to say, as a student, I really enjoy this debate. I find it very encouraging to see. I used to be a model UN kid, so I've seen stuff like this. But I will say that I do appreciate the heart taken on this topic. Of course, I just think at the moment, of course I'm not a voting member by any sense of the imagination, but I will say that, in my opinion, PD versus instructional development, perhaps a conversation to have next year. But I will say that as far as the current schedule looks, I'd say that this is the best attempt that I think could be considered when approaching some arbitrary law that, again, really isn't founded on anything other than someone decided it should be so. So I believe we achieved consistency, and I'm sure that we can all take these lessons to heart, especially the students can learn to adapt heading into next year's.
Thank you, Krishna. Elizabeth?
Well, I mean, how am I supposed to follow that? I just would say, but just to say the thing, like, it's like, don't make a false dichotomy about it, right? It's not like this or that. It's just like, you have choices, and you have to make choices, and, you know, based on circumstances. So I don't think that, like, Eric and I are saying that PD is lesser than instructional in minutes, but, like, they have different value. That's all.
All right.
But also what Krishna said.
All right, I think we're ready to vote at this point. Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Eric?
Nay.
Peter?
Aye.
Philip?
Aye.
Lorene? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right. Next one is Middleton, Cross Plains area, and Monona Grove School District's Cooperative Contract, Safety and Security Services, Wisconsin Statute 66.0301.
Okay, you've had a presentation previously from Jim Blodgett, who is our Safety and Security Director. When you had approved this one-year agreement a year ago, it was with the understanding that we were planning on a 2-year agreement, but we thought best to approve 1 year at a time. Middleton Cross Plains Board did approve this on Monday night. We're asking for approval for next year.
I have a motion. Susan?
I move approval of the 2023-2024 cooperative agreement with Middleton Cross Plains Area School District for safety and security services as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Is this, you know, is this something that we think we're going to need on an ongoing basis? Or is this something that we're going to do to set up services going forward?
Yeah, great question. So the original idea is that is part of the year 2 is to develop the plan. What do we do after Jim leaves? And so one option is that we figure out where we might have capacity from our existing staff to continue that work. Another option might be that we do need some additional help with that, a similar type of arrangement. Whether this be at this level or not, it to be determined. So that will be a key part of next year's planning, that the board will be part of that conversation. So I don't know what the recommendation will be. The work that's been done, a lot of it, I would say a lot of it is a one-time thing where we've gotten behind COVID, things got put on pause, that to get some things in place where we're a little behind, but then there's always going to be ongoing work as well. So how to do that ongoing work is to be determined.
And I wouldn't necessarily say one time, but maybe just periodic. Doesn't have to be done.
That's probably a better way of
That's a better word
it.
for it. Yes, we need to look at security on a regular basis, but do we need to have somebody full-time every year to do that? Is the question. Okay.
Okay, Elizabeth and then Susan.
Just piggybacking off of Peter's question, because I had a similar one, is the discussion around this part of kind of the overarching staffing plan audit that we're currently...
This would not be included as part of that.
Okay.
That's focusing more on the HR component and specifically hiring of teachers.
Okay. And then, sorry, Susan, just one more question. Anything here changed from last year, or is it the same?
No,
as
it's
last year?
identical, just due date.
Great.
Okay, Susan?
I just want to say, if anybody else had a chance at the state WSB meeting to go to any of these safety programs, it makes it very clear that we need this service. And the reporting out that I think we've had, in fact, Dan is just trying to hold me back a little bit. Good for you. But we probably should be getting monthly reports. And when you listen to the state people who are working on these projects and working in the buildings and the work that they're trying to do, one, we have to make our staff comfortable in our schools. And there has to be a very clear plan and very clear training. And right now, in our program that we've started, we are getting a professional evaluation for every single building and training for our staff. And we cannot, in any way, as school board members, not do that. And right now, based on the feedback we're getting, and I would say every month, every 2 months, just an update. Where have you been? Which building have you been in? Are you training? Again, professional development. This is critical to the learning environment of our students. And so, based on the feedback I think we've gotten as a board, I'm very comfortable renewing this contract and would support it.
Krishna?
Go ahead, Krishna.
Thank you. Specifically to complement Susan's points, of course I understand that this contract has a clearly significant impact on our school, but how specifically does it impact students?
Yeah, great question. I'll say everything that is done is specifically with students in mind. So what it starts with the physical safety of buildings, okay, and then the other part is the making sure we're in compliance, not only compliance with the drills. We talked earlier about safe statutes. This is one that, I don't think we argue is a bad, piece as far as the requirements, but then making sure coordinating and helping support training our administrators, teachers on the drills that we do, and then all the other, safety plans that are in place. So really, it's an overall comprehensive thing, everything that has anything to do with school safety, about the environment and so on.
Thank you.
I don't know who's first. Elizabeth and.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to, okay, so I feel like I wasn't precise in my language with the question I asked you before, based on your answer. Anyway, I'm going to re-ask my question about the staffing. So not the certified staffing plan that's in this for discussion. You know how we're doing the audit on our administrative?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
With the Elma.
Yes.
Yes.
Is this part of,
Yeah.
or thinking about this in terms of job duties part of that?
Yeah, it is not.
Okay.
So that is pretty comprehensive, but it's really focusing on the instructional side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sorry to ask again.
Peter?
I'm assuming this is Fund 10, not Fund 80, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any way in the future that we could think about, is there a way to make this community-based and so that we can have a community, Fund 80, fund this rather than Fund 10? And obviously it has to get outside the walls of our school, and
I mean, our SRO is funded by Fund 80.
well, SRO is Fund 80, correct.
Yeah. And
So I'm just asking for consideration of that thought, and maybe something, and maybe it might be equivalent to ask the person you hire. It might be a way to ask that. And I understand they're split between two school districts already, and splitting them up some more would be more of a challenge. However, I think it's worth, we want to squeeze his pennies, and I think it's worth asking that question: can we make it a Fund 80 versus a Fund 10?
I'm curious to know if you have any initial thoughts on that, either you or.
I'm not gonna, no, that's not my expertise.
Okay.
Pretty clearly defined categories. It would be a little change in job description, I think. That's what you're indicating.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
I
you wouldn't
think-
do it this year, but
Yeah,
maybe
you can't just
next.
do that.
I think the other thing is, if you look at the essential job functions, and I think because we had that report in, one of the reports in policy, because we were looking at policy, I think in that particular meeting, there was discussion about who are you working with, who are you talking to. Right here, it says essential job functions, create and maintain positive working relationships with members of the surrounding community. So effectively, if you read what's supposed to be done, the issue is evaluating whether or not that's getting done. It's right there in the plan. And working with students is doing the action plans. We have to make you comfortable when we're doing the practice runs. And starting with, again, this is the first year we've done it. So it would be nice, again, when we're approving the contract, Dan, just to have a quick update maybe on the night or the board meeting just before, when we're gonna be looking at this contract again, because then it's more clear in your mind what has been done this year and the major things that are still going to continue to be done, that need to be done, whether it's this person or someone else.
All right. Krishna?
If I may add a student's tone to this, I don't believe I need to dramatize the exigence of such safety procedures at our schools. Within the past decade, within my own lifetime, we've had to see the development of this horrendous phenomenon of the safety and sanctity of our schools being relentlessly breached. So that is why when I see a policy like this, not only do I feel in full support with it, but I also feel like there's more that we can do. This is a very new phenomenon, and thus it is required that we all, the board, but of course the administration and us students, and the community, we all have to continue to adapt. And so while I recognize it's not necessarily referenced, or nor is it to be referenced by this one contract alone, in regards to our safety policy, I wish to advance a question of what are we considering in terms of preventative measures? Not simply in job descriptions and drills, though of course that role cannot be overstated, but the one topic that I feel is most important for us students to hit home is that of mental health. Of course, I have no clue what it was like in your generation, but whether it's human...
Now.
I'm sorry.
I was with you, Krishna, for a minute.
No, you just have more life experience. You're just wiser.
Call her a millennial, she loves it.
An exclamation point millennial, I see. Of course, I'm not sure what it's like for you, but it's very common for me to hear either as a joke or as a cry for help, I don't know. But on the daily, there's always people who say that they will kill themselves or they're having horrendous thoughts. I think that we're really going through a mental health crisis right now, and that's where you start to see all of these factors emerge, which result in such horrendous actions that necessitate this, which wasn't even conceivable a generation ago, or even a few years ago. And so with that, I ultimately want to advance that the first thing is that I think that we should really expand preventative measures in terms of health. And the second thing is that, and I heard this mentioned earlier and I loved it, is that we need student voice in this. I'm just one person, and I appreciate my opportunity here, but there are thousands of kids at our district and millions across the nation who don't have this privilege. And so that's why I think it is of the utmost necessity that we reach out to our students and see how we can make the schools a safer place.
Well said. I definitely agree, especially that mental health piece. It's crucial.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I
Thank
want
you.
Katie Schmidt to come so badly. She runs the
Well,
children's
Susan?
psychiatry.
And that might be something, I mean, we have talked quite a bit about that, and we have added social workers, for example, and when you talk about professional development, one of the things is trauma-enforced training. I mean, those are the kinds of things that can happen during professional development days, but we have worked to increase student services staff. Krista might speak to that. So that's not, the preventative stuff is not so much the purview of this person, although there's maybe a role to play. It falls in, but it's not that we're not doing it, it's just under a different umbrella, and it's a big one. I mean, it's a big one statewide. You hear that in the governor's budget. It's something that's being emphasized around. So it's an excellent point, and that is something we really need to be looking at. And I think we are. You just might not see it with this contract.
Of course, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so specifically, that's a great question. So our student services staff, of course, that's a key piece of the work that they do to help support our students. Where this comes in, as far as the safety and security, is helping facilitate, for example, reporting tools. So there's something we talked about earlier, the Speak Out system through the DOJ. And so Jim was really instrumental in working with our student services team on having something that was useful for them to be able to pass along to students as far as how they can report. So that's kind of where his role comes in on the technical side, working with our experts in the schools.
Thank you, Deb.
Excellent points. I mean,
Yeah.
you're right on.
Yes.
It's an ongoing discussion that we have. It's a topic that we addressed before and we'll continue to address.
All right, are we ready to vote? Susan Manning?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Peter? Philip?
Aye.
Lorraine? Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, next is discussion items, 2023, 2024 certified staffing plan.
Okay, so we had this as an agenda item at our previous board meeting. This is the type of thing that we're constantly continue to work on this spring. So there's only one change in this plan from what you saw 2 weeks ago, and that is with regard to special education staffing. So Krista and her team have had an opportunity to finish their evaluation based on current student needs, or I guess I should say anticipated student needs for next fall. And so you'll see the increase, the recommendation for one additional FTE in special education, broken up in two parts. The early childhood increasing by a 0.5 FTE, and then down lower, the special education by a 0.5. So a total of 1.0 FTE increase in special education. It's directly based upon, of course, the services needed to provide per our IEPs and what we anticipate. The other piece that we always, the last piece to come in oftentimes is at the high school FTE, where as we go through the high school course requests and so on, had an opportunity to meet with Mr. Graff earlier this morning. And they're not finalized completely in that process, but it appears at this point we will not need to recommend additional FTE for next year at the high school. And so this is going to be very close to the final. If something changes as we go on, I'll certainly bring it back to the board. But so you'll see it is pretty much a status quo. The two things, just to maybe repeat what I said at the last meeting, special services like EL, special ed is one thing we look at, and the other is class size. And so you'll see at the elementary and K-8 an increase of 2 FTE just because of class sizes, or to maintain our class size. So.
Can I have a motion, please?
Oh, this is just discussion.
Yeah, it's not up for action tonight, so it's just information.
All right. I just have a question for Krista.
Yeah.
Hi, Krista. Hi. So with the change in staffing, or the additional staffing, what is our, I was gonna say ratio, but I don't want like student to staff ratio, but like amount of special education teachers, or let's start with teachers per building with this new staffing model.
Well, it varies per building.
Right.
It's the goal, like pretty much a 1 to 150 teacher, special ed teacher to student ratio within the building. That's a big part of the formula, honestly, is overall building size because of the proactive work and the co-planning and, kind of in a workload model. So I guess I can share that.
Yeah.
And this would bring us back into alignment to those ratios.
So there's additional staffing for early childhood.
And we've only had 1.5 early childhood, so this would be, we'd have a fully dedicated EC staff member in both communities.
Great.
And that itinerant need has grown pretty
Yeah.
exponentially, so we've been looking at that, having our eye on it.
That's perfect. And then where's the other half of the FTE going?
With a lot.
Got it, okay, so additional fully staffed EC, fully staffed Winnequa, fully staffed Cottage Grove across the board?
I would say as of today, right?
Yeah, that's all, that's.
Special ed's a bit of a moving target, right?
Yeah.
It is prime season right now, so I won't promise that this is the last
Yeah.
change we'll bring ahead to you, but as of today, with our
Good.
predictions and how we look at it today, yes, this would bring us to where we need. There's a few, moving pieces to consider, right?
Good. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question for you, Chris, and you may not be able to answer this, I'm just curious. Is there an average special education teacher case management number that is an expectation that you have for each special ed teacher?
We try not to give it a specific number and do more of a workflow.
Of course.
Obviously, I think it's fair to say we've noticed a pretty substantial increase in we've always, I would say, been staffed very, in a way that allows for a lot of proactive work too. So I would say at our elementary level, though, we're getting upwards of like where 8 to 10 is becoming much more of an average caseload. I think that's different than in the past. And then secondary, move on up and assume, larger capacity. 12, I think is the number we use for open enrollment, and we're, in that range.
But that number.
We don't use it hard and fast,
Sure, I know that. I'm just trying to get an idea of, do you see that number going up?
Yes, I would say that number has gone up
Okay.
across the board, and we've made some adjustments and brought some things back into alignment. We did add mid-year a couple of teaching positions this year that were partially in response to some unanticipated increased numbers and partially in response to that other side of the coin, which is our SEA staffing and some of the challenges we've had with maintaining consistent allocations of our SEA positions to just increasing need. There's two ways to address that need.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Moving on to future meeting dates. They are listed in board docs. Yep.
I forgot to say during TLE that, so normally we meet on the fourth Monday of every month, but because of spring break, we're not meeting in March. And we're gonna meet in April on the 17th, which is the third Monday, so it's a change in our typical schedule.
And I just have a question for Philip, actually. Are you able to hear the comments from when we've had staff speaking from the audience? Are you able to hear that? Because we usually have people come up to the mic, and we haven't been doing that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, yep, I'm picking it up.
Okay, good, because that means that you just, it should be picking up, Joe.
Oh, that's good. That's a good, that was a great question. So it was just like shouting to the.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make that April 24th meeting now. I don't know if there's any way we can reschedule it for a different time, but.
That's reorganization.
Yeah, I know,
And so that's,
I know,
Is
that's
that
why.
statutory?
That's why I'm
well,
saying
it
it.
doesn't have to be held on that, it can be, we typically, no, it doesn't. That's the first date that you can do it, is that fourth Monday in April. Most boards
Is there any
do
way-
so that they can,
Adjust the time, maybe?
What works for you?
Yeah,
Not 6?
like before or earlier or later?
Earlier.
What day of the week is that? On Monday?
When?
Wednesday?
Or you could switch it to a Wednesday, right?
it doesn't have to be on the Monday.
Yeah, I could do it on the 26th, but I could do it like at 3:30, 4. I don't know how long it's
That's
gonna
a
go.
challenge.
Yeah.
Good challenge for you.
Can you do it
Typically,
later?
the reorg is, your normal things you have to do at that meeting, and then if there are one or two agenda items that can't wait, we sometimes tack those on at the end, but it generally is not a long meeting.
Can we just do it Wednesday?
We
26th?
elect the officers, so.
Right.
I don't want to inconvenience anybody though. If that Wednesday doesn't work for anybody, then I'd just say go without me.
I don't want to go without you for reorg.
Well,
But
if you
it
have to,
doesn't
you
work
have
for
to.
me.
It doesn't work for
Wednesday
you?
doesn't work for you.
Yeah, so
We
just,
can't, we can't
don't worry
move it
about
up?
it.
Is
Don't
there a
worry
way to
about
hit like a 4, 4:30?
No, it's just not gonna work, so that's all right. I just won't be there, it's fine.
Well,
And it's okay, it
Tuesday's
happens.
thrown out there too.
What's that?
Tuesday.
A Tuesday's
Yeah,
thrown
I'm
out.
about that, I'm just suggesting, it could be any other
Yeah.
day.
is there a
Yeah,
comment, Dan?
can't do
Yeah,
Tuesday.
so I should probably look up the statute, but I'm very confident saying that you have a several week window in
Yeah,
which
you
to
do.
hold this.
Yeah.
You just, usually boards try to do it right away because they're electing officers, but so you're kind of in limbo until you do your reorg meeting.
Right, but
When
you can't leave the same officers in place.
Correct, until
When do new members start?
that day.
That day.
That's the first day that,
Yeah.
okay.
My preference is to elect our officers when everyone can be here, if that's
Yeah.
possible.
I think that's important.
Well, to you, but to me.
He hates having to do that.
I didn't plan this when that meeting was made, but it's something that came up that I would say let's keep it on the 24th and let me see if I can fix it, and Lorraine, I'll let you know.
Okay,
All right.
Okay.
all right. And the other board meetings, March 22nd and then April 12th. All
Okay.
right. And can I have a motion for adjournment?
But we adjourn.
Okay.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Motion
Aye.
carried. Meeting's adjourned.